Hello, everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation, but we have to start on time because we're on live TV. Welcome to our session here today, which we call From Vision to Legacy. This is about the Stevens Creek Corridor project and the development of the plans for it and where we are and what we're about to undertake. We did this plan in a unique way where we decided to leave the planning to the community. The council set some broad direction about what it would like to see, but the plans themselves, the ideas of the plan came from the community, and of course we synthesized them into the plan we're going to actually execute. And the reason we had to do the synthesis is that we received back over 100 plans from people, from over 500 people. And so together we worked it down to what we are actually going to execute, and we want to unveil that to you today, to the people that participated in the process. We hope you enjoy tonight's session, but we also hope you agree that this is a great plan. So with that, let's roll the video and see what we have in store.
Of the Stevens Creek Corridor is to retain the popular landmark of the Blue Pheasant restaurant as it is. We also feel strongly that we need to retain the golf course.
For the Blackberry Farm, we made a trail going through the whole area. We made bridges for people to walk on, and we changed the vehicular drive-thrus to bridges.
We have a trail going there, and we put the entrance fee so that you can walk around, go to the picnic area for free, but you have to pay once you go into the pool.
We plan to retain the existing assets of the Blue Pheasant, the golf course, the orchard, the McClellan Ranch, and the community gardens.
Gave me a ride in a golf cart, so I got to see everything. So thank you, Michael.
The city of Cupertino seems to have a motto, "We'll make it happen." I heard that several times.
To McClellan Ranch, we're going to make it more nature-based, and we're going to enhance the educational features by enlarging the Junior Nature Museum and leaving the barn, the Sims house, the community gardens, and the amphitheater the same size that they originally were.
Well, we had 4 major things for our Stevens Creek Corridor project, and that was to renovate make the Nature Museum larger, make a trail through from McClellan Ranch all the way to the Stockmeyer site so people can enjoy the nature and the creek.
The master goal is to preserve and restore the natural environment along the creek. And I suggest that be done by a combination of landscape architecture and ecological restoration.
For better or worse. So we've owned this resource. The residents and citizens of Cupertino have owned this resource for over 35 years, since 1971. And we recently polled our residents about the park and found that they still think of it as, not as a public resource, but in fact as sort of a pay-for-use, maybe a little amusement park. And we wanted to change that. For quite a while, the City Council has had this goal of providing more walkability in Cupertino, more things to do in Cupertino. We'd like people to have more options to spend time outside, less in their cars. And this seems like a good place for us to execute that vision. The way that this planning process started was frankly, if we go way back, it was with a task force that then Whitney was really little, not even as young as she is on this tape. We did a task force on the Stevens Creek Trail. The Stevens Creek Trail is a big plan trail that goes from the bay to the ocean. And we had a little segment of it here that goes through the Stevens Creek corridor that would go through the Blackberry Farm Golf Course and McClellan Ranch. But when we saw that and how it integrated well with our desire to have walkability, we had a major concern about its impact on nature. Because the reason that the corridor is interesting, our council agreed, was because of the creek. And having a healthy creek was vital to making this an interesting and good part of Cupertino. So the trail, then we kind of backed away from the trail as being the focus and the council agreed as their number one priority was restoration of the creek. And when we went out there, and we went out there with scientists, and some of whom you'll hear from today, what we found was the creek was not very healthy for nature, not very hospitable to fish, and we decided to take that as the beginning point. And frankly, some of the reason for doing that was if we were going to bring through the impacts of a trail, which would allow you to walk through that area, we thought we should mitigate those impacts. That's one of our words, mitigation, by restoring the creek back to its, as much as we could, to its natural state. So that's kind of a gift back to nature. If we're all going to be walking through there, then we wanted to be sure that we paid our price to nature by making sure that the creek was healthy. So that became our highest priority, interestingly enough, the health of the creek. The second priority was access for our residents, because if you look at the statistics for Blackberry Farm, for instance, the number of Cupertino residents that use it is very small, way under 50%. Primarily it's used by outside groups, primarily by outside business groups. So we did want to get Cupertino residents in there, and to do that we thought we needed to create a healthy environment, and so that's what we set off on. You'll see a lot of the impacts of that, and after we collected all of these visions, we kept those priorities in mind, in fact gave those priorities to our visionaries out there in the community, and that was kind of our only restriction on them. We wanted to stay in that envelope of a healthy creek and access for our residents. So then we went on to the visionary process. Next up, we'll have Therese talk a little bit about the visionary process and where we came out. This is Therese Smith, our Director of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Richard. It is so much fun to see people back here that I've not seen since 2003 when you presented your vision to the City Council. And I hope what you see tonight in this plan, you won't see all, we of course couldn't roll everybody's idea, but we have, I think, a little bit from everyone here in the final plan. So thank you for coming back. As Richard mentioned, this project has been on everyone's, at least on my radar screen for a very long time, but it actually started back in 1971 when the city acquired the first parcel of land in the chain, and that acquisition went for 25 years, 7 parcels, $30 million. Various planning efforts have been underway since 2001, beginning with trail planning. And then your project, I think what really got this off the ground was the 2003 effort that so many people in the community contributed to. I mentioned to a couple people that I spoke with in circulating the tables, but it was that level of community participation that really got grantors interested, because one of the things people look for when they're, what they look at when they want to fund a good project is there a community behind it? The Water District was the first organization to step up. We have some representatives from the district here tonight. Thank you. The Collaborative Action Plan was signed in July of 2004, and then together we were able to leverage an additional $3.4 million in 2005 and 6. The very extensive environmental review that was ongoing for 18 months concluded in June, And finally, last month, the City Council approved a project scope for the first phase of almost $11.2 million. It's a significant park project for the City of Cupertino. You should all be very proud of the role you played in bringing this forward. And I'm going to walk through just a bit of what Phase 1 includes. Again, there's a lot to this project. There's a flyer on the table each of you can take home. What we complete in 2009 will certainly not be all of it. It'll be a good first step. The dividing line between Phase 1 and 2 geographically is right there. The construction that we will undertake, and Ralph will talk about that a little bit later in the program, the $11.2 million first phase, basically runs from the end of the existing parking lot through to McClellan Road. One of the things that I want to show you in this diagram, which is more of an engineering drawing, is the amount of pavement that's going to be removed as part of this effort. You will see that the creek's been realigned, and when that happens, a big portion of this parking lot goes away. This was needed because Blackberry Farm in the past served up to 4,000 people at one time. In its new configuration, the group picnic area will serve 800. So the parking lot, which is currently this area, has been scaled back to allow for a creek meander. This is what it will look like. This is moving without me. This is a computer-generated drawing that will show that parking lot with the creek realignment and all of the picnicking confined to the west side. And why that's important is the trail runs along the east side of the park and will be open 365 days a year. The picnic area, which will still be an entry fee kind of arrangement, you can reserve a site for a family reunion or party. Stop doing that. But it will be accessed from here. And another thing that's important to know is that the entry to the fee use area is moved to here. So the queue of cars on San Fernando will be removed. Currently, people queue up to enter Blackberry Farm from this area. Thank you, Ron. So the actual queue point will be here, will be reached on foot. You cross the bridge into the picnic area. We'll have carts available for people to transport food if they need it, and this is shown on that plan. So the trail then runs along the east side and is always available. The trail will have access to the pool. If you come with your kids on bikes and you want to go swimming, you can pay a fee and use the pool area. You'll also have access to the snack bar. And I think it's important to note that the fencing will be pulled out around the pool, enclosing the lawn area. Again, it's now being used more as a community facility. You enter here for the pool. You come in, you use the pool and the lawn without using the picnic area. And that wasn't something we had available in the past. The snack bar area is right out here. Here's the snack bar and some picnic tables. They're accessible from the trail. If we look at that in the plan view, the trail runs through here and really connects all these features together all the way to McClellan, again on the east side, with the picnic area, the reservable picnic area, the fee-for-use picnic area, isolated on the west side. Now, as I mentioned before, the trail does run the length of the corridor. In this phase, it will be constructed from Blackberry Farm to McClellan, and in McClellan, it goes to the far east of the 4-H area in the garden because it was our intent to minimize impacts to the meadow. And that existing footpath is pretty much right along here now, behind the 4-H area. Because we want this trail to be wholly accessible, we will be moving it down slope so that it's an accessible grade, and we will have to relocate some of the 4-H facilities to make that happen. And we're working with the San Jose Conservation Corps and 4-H to do that and have secured grant funds to make it happen. A new feature to McClellan Ranch supports another important goal of the City Council, and that is to enhance the environmental education opportunities. And we feel it's very important to get this underway soon because we have such a wonderful story to tell there with the interpretation of bringing a creek back. We used to have a double-wide trailer out here at McClellan Ranch. It sat on this site, so there are water and other utilities available. And that will be the site of the environmental classroom, which at this point will look like a ranch building and replace what is the current environmental classroom, which are these bleachers out here, and the Junior Nature Museum. And with the addition of a covered area for instruction, Barbara will be able to offer more in the winter. She'll have a roof over her head for the first time. With that, I'd like to focus now a bit on the creek because, as Richard said, this is the park that was designed around the creek. And so it's important now to look at what some of the improvements to the creek, look at what some of the improvements we need to make to the creek are to make that the best possible environment. So if you can roll that video.
Hi, we're standing actually at a low-flow road crossing here that connects one side of the park to the other, and it's one of a couple of similar structures within the footprint of the park that are slated for removal. As it turns out, these kinds of low-flow road crossings are a barrier for fish to migrate up and down in the system and prevent, in particular, juvenile fish from having good access to the kind of habitat that's available upstream. Stevens Creek is home to one of the best populations of steelhead trout in Santa Clara County, and this part of Stevens Creek is a critical part of their habitat. This is the part of the stream where adults migrate and spawn and young rear. And so work that goes on in this part of the stream has a significant impact on their survivability.
As I mentioned before, we could incorporate every idea into this plan, and in fact, we learned a whole lot more after we started to design the ideas that we chose to implement, or that the council chose to implement. And I'd like to introduce Sean Chartrand from Balance Hydrologics. Obviously, when you talk about moving creeks around, things that have been there, even if they've been moved once, when you're moving them back, there are a lot of concerns that you have to take into consideration, not only environmental, but obviously flooding. And Sean will talk to you a little bit about his analysis and how the creek will function after it's relocated. Sean?
Thanks, Teresa. Great. It's very exciting to be here tonight. Especially given the fact that I'm trained as a geologist, and it's very exciting to work on issues that occur in contemporary times as opposed to millions and millions of years ago. And I'd like to mention also that the material I'm going to run through tonight is the result of effort by many, many people who can't be here tonight, notably Stacy Porter, Dr. John Stam from our shop, as well as Dipankar Sen from the Water District. So I'm just going to briefly walk through some of the more technical background to the channel design as it currently stands. And I think a decent way of introducing that topic is to ask the question, why are we here? I know I'm here for the great food that we just had, and I'm not quite sure why you all are here, but I hope that we can give you a glimpse as to where we are now, where we've come from, and where we'd like to go. So in a global perspective, we're here because Stevens Creek has some issues. Scott Aiken just spoke to some of those issues. This is a photograph of a partial fish passage barrier on Stevens Creek through Blackberry Farm. It's near the end of the parking lot. I can tell you that this structure itself offers absolutely zero ecological benefit, and it's one of the structures that's slated to be removed in our restoration plans. So when we started this work, we thought, you know what, we'd like to go from this condition to this condition, or somewhere close to this condition. I throw this slide up there because this is a photograph of a very pristine natural stream corridor in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We can't get anywhere close to this, but our plan is focused at renaturalizing the creek through the farm for everyone's enjoyment as well as for the betterment of species there. Now, in walking you through our work, I think it's very useful to first outline the objectives of the project, and that sort of set the stage for how we came to be a part of the work. Our project had 4 primary objectives. First, to restore geomorphic function. Geomorphic is just a fancy term. It deals with the science of investigating the processes that shape the surface of the planet Earth specifically, as well as other planetary bodies. Second, to restore biological function. Third, to design for a stable channel corridor. And 4, to preserve flood conveyance through the project reach. And I'll go through each one of these in a little more detail. Here's a photograph of another stream crossing or ford on Stevens Creek at Blackberry Farm. I spent a little bit of time at this location in 1998 with Stacy Lee as a part of some other work that we did for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. From a geomorphic perspective, the crossing and the creek in this location has very little functionality. As a result, this is another crossing that we would propose to remove in our plans. In putting our plans together, there are some basic geomorphic functions that we brought into the plans. Four of those are introducing floodplain communication. That's a fancy way for saying that we'd like the creek to flood its floodplain on a more regular basis, perhaps 1 to every 3 years, as a more natural system will do. There's a little bit of video footage early on that suggested the creek might flood the floodplain, say, every 5 to 7 years. We have to consider that 95 and 98 were considerably very wet years, and it's probably more realistic that it floods every 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years out there. Second, in bringing back a more natural stream corridor system, we will inevitably bring back the functionality of filtering and storing nutrients and sediment in the floodplain area. Considerable amount of research has gone into this topic, and we benefit greatly from that in bringing that to the designs here. We want to bring some more functionality to sediment transport through the reach. Right now, the reach is basically a source of sediment, and we want to balance it to a source and a transport avenue. Basically, what comes in at the top, over the long term, we want to go out at the bottom, have a little balance there. And in looking at the existing functionings in the corridor now, we were very careful, spent a lot of time at designing some plans that will minimize impact to existing habitat and species that live there now. Second is to restore some biological function. This is the same picture of the crossing in the previous photo, just a slightly different perspective looking downstream. I think it doesn't take a scientist to look at this and surmise that there's probably very little benefit to fish at this exact location on the creek. And as a result, we need to remedy that. Some of the biological functions, though, that we believe our plans will bring to the corridor include enhancing salmonid habitat, specifically for steelhead, removing migration barriers, which is obviously very important for fish to be able to move around freely and find the best spawning grounds and rearing habitat. Third, to enhance the riparian habitat, and specifically the complexity of the habitat. If we're successful in bringing back complexity, meaning we have low shrubs, trees, shrubs that grow 8 to 10 feet high, an upper canopy for larger bird habitat, and then some in-channel wood, large rocks that provide refuge and hiding places for fish, that's where we're going to see the greatest diversity of species come back to the corridor. And I really feel like our plans bring all that to the table right now. Third, there's some very specific unstable locations along the corridor at the Blackberry Farm. This is a photograph of one of those locations. You can see they've rip-wrapped the banks in the past, even sack-creted it. Our design definitely addresses this, but the bigger picture question in terms of the science of this, how do you restore to a stable channel configuration? To do that, you sort of have to think like a stream, and it's easier said than done, but I've brought a video along that I think will get all of us sort of going in that trajectory. So this is a photograph of sediment transport on a low gradient mountain stream. It's a little different than Stevens Creek, but it's very apparent that I can tell you when this video was shot, the depth of flow in the river was only about a foot deep. It's just moving a tremendous amount of sediment and debris. And it really drives home a great point that a very smart geomorphologist once made in a public meeting in a room full of farmers that, rivers don't move water, they move sediment. And any channel design has to address that fact. It's probably the most difficult thing to address in our work. But in bringing a stable channel back to the corridor through the park, we've chosen, as best we can, a natural channel design. That means we're using forms and geometries and shapes of the river that are, in fact, consistent with where we lie in the watershed and given the valley type. We've balanced sediment transport as best we can through the design reach, ensuring that over the long term, what comes in at the top will go out at the bottom. We're planning on a little local erosion and local deposition. That's going to come with every restoration project. It'll be a little vulnerable through the first couple of years after it's constructed, but we have designed some extra safety elements per se into the design to account for that. We brought some very fun biotechnical approaches, meaning that we're not going to rely on as hard structures, concrete and lots of rock. We're trying to use Mother Nature as our guide to how to rebuild some of the banks and slopes out there. It's where restoration, renaturalization is going these days, and we've certainly brought as much of that into this project as we can. And in a global sense, we have to plan for reach-wide stability, meaning as the creek is built in its overall form and shape, it needs to remain there. But we, like I said, account for a little bit of change here and there. Last, we must preserve flood conveyance through the design reach. This is a photograph of a stream on the western slope of the Santa Cruz Mountains at flood stage. I don't know how many of you have seen a flood occur. It's quite great. As a scientist, you learn a tremendous amount. I've gauged this particular stream for the last 7 years, and my gauge is in this photograph, but I can't get the mouse to work. The staff plate's sticking up by those trees by about 6 inches. So I was out there just to see, to make sure the gauge didn't get swept away. But specifically, the design will not significantly raise the 100-year flood elevation through the design reach, and it does not affect the 100-year flood water surface elevation on the upstream or downstream end of the project reach. And the design channel as it stands now, if you were at the top of the bank looking down into the channel, it will convey what we call the 10-year flood event. So a flood event that will occur approximately once out of every 10 years. So with these project objectives, we moved into the channel design work. I'm just going to very briefly talk about our channel design tasks. First, we looked at stream classification. It's the first thing you pretty much need to look at. If you classify the stream incorrectly, your design is going to get off to the wrong foot. Second, we identified a reference reach that had the characteristics of stream that we wanted to bring back to the corridor. We did a fairly detailed channel layout alternatives analysis. The photograph to the right illustrates some of that work. We did some sediment transport computations, very detailed hydraulic analysis looking at flood water surface elevations. Spent a lot of time looking at in-stream habitat structures for fish, as well as other enhancement and stabilizing measures. And this has led us to the 50% construction documents. This is a page out of those documents. We can't go through it now, but looking forward, we're all very excited to move on to the next phase. And I think now we're going to look at a video from Fish and Game that shows some steelhead in a creek, perhaps Stevens.
Fish migration barriers fragment river systems in numerous ways and threaten the survival of at-risk Pacific salmon and steelhead stocks. Man-made migration barriers include dams, water diversions, and the most common barrier of all, culverts. Culverts are found at nearly every place a road crosses a stream, and a surprising number of them partially or completely block fish passage. As road networks and water projects have expanded over the past 75 years, culvert barriers have divided the river continuum into many short segments, preventing adult salmon and steelhead from reaching their spawning grounds and disrupting the seasonal migrations and feeding patterns of in-stream rearing juveniles. These disruptions have contributed significantly to the overall decline of salmon and steelhead populations in the Pacific Northwest. The good news is that many types of barriers are now being replaced with functional fish passage structures. More and more barriers are being systematically removed and are being replaced with structures that adequately allow fish passage of adult and juvenile salmon and trout. But getting to the stage of implementing projects has been a long and bumpy road. Eventual success has been the result of widespread cooperation between multiple players, spanning multiple counties, agencies, and jurisdictions. Tools and technologies have been developed, inventories completed, prioritizations set, and funds acquired for project implementation. Now we are beginning to see verifiable results.
Is that my cue? I have no picture here anymore, so. Well, can we thank Sean for sharing his expertise with us, please? One of the challenges of this project is to mix people and nature. It's probably the most difficult part, and we have on our team Jonna Sokal, who is kind of the expert in that, and we've relied on her for a lot of work where we want to carefully manage the border between us, people, and nature. We talked so far a lot about removing the obstacles for fish. There were also some obstacles for people in here, and this isn't all about fish. One of the obstacles for people that's been in the park for a long time, and one of the reasons that not many of you residents are out there, is that we charge $8 to go in. And we don't think that would work very well for a year-round trail. We don't think that would, it may inhibit some of you from using it. And so one of the things that we did, and as one of the challenges of this project, was to keep some fee use areas like the swimming pools and have the trail open year-round. And then to balance the impacts of the trail with the primary goal of restoring the creek. And John has been our expert there, and you'll see things like I don't know how much she'll go into this, but the trail is a soft trail. It's not asphalt. It's a pervious trail, so that it's good for the environment. It's not too close to the creek, but close enough so you can take a peek. And yet we still will be able to get some revenue out of that area, which is important to the city. So it's a balancing act. Jonna's our specialist at that balance. And so let me introduce Jonna Sokal to talk about that. Jonna? It's good to see you.
Thank you.
You can clap. It's okay.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the balance and the compromises that we've made with regard to upland restoration and the trail placement within the creek corridor. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the baseline biological conditions that we discovered in our work, what our restoration goals are for the entire corridor, the native plant communities that we'll be working to restore, and then how the trail will integrate into those areas. In 2004 and 2005, a team of biologists from Thomas Reed Associates, myself, biologists from the Santa Clara Valley Water District, worked to gather background data on what was living in the corridor and what was the health of the corridor. And that provided a baseline for what we wanted to restore. We learned that this corridor is the habitat of the largest big brown bat maternity colony in the county, and that bat colony lives in this area because of the unique habitat that still exists. It's also habitat for many nesting birds of prey and songbirds that come through in the summer months. You also see many common mammal species in the corridor, from bobcats and deer down to the smaller mammals. In addition, of course, to the steelhead that we've all been hearing about, and that has been an impetus for the creek restoration, we also know that there's a potential for western pond turtles to occur, and that's a species that's declining throughout California. Unfortunately, in this work, we also identified that the forest structure within the corridor, particularly within the downstream areas through Blackberry Farm, is in decline. It's in decline for a number of reasons, but some of those reasons are from a loss of natural flooding. Of course, we have a dam on the river now. and through various human disturbances. The area was a vineyard, it was agriculture, it's now used as a commercial picnic facility. So over time, we've had human impacts in the corridor. What we want to do now is try and give back to the environment a bit, and we're doing that by developing a multi-layer canopy, and replacing some of the aging trees. If you've been in the corridor over the past year, especially through the winter storms, we've lost some of the most beautiful trees to the wind effects, and we've had large sycamores and oaks come down. We need to be replacing those, and they haven't been being replaced because of lack of flooding and human disturbance. The key goals here are to restore the ecological processes of the corridor, and a key one there is overbank flooding. We also are using a multi-species approach to enhance the habitat within the context of trying to improve it for steelhead. But if we allow steelhead to move up and down the corridor, then western pond turtles can move up and down the stream, then tadpoles can move up and down the stream, then other species can move. So we're trying to work throughout the whole context. We're also going to try and preserve the genetic variability and the adaptations of the plants in the corridor. And the city is currently collecting, growing, and preparing to install native plants that have been selected from this site. And these goals will only be achieved through active adaptive management. And what does that mean is that when this project is done, when the construction is done and the trucks have left, we still have to monitor that site and look at what is happening and change our operations based on what we learn. And it will always be that way because we have changed the site forever. We've urbanized the Bay Area, and we'll have to continue to work with the system. We're looking at 3 native plant communities that will be restored. One is the low elevation creek bank. These are some of the native plants that will work with the stream restoration that Sean has spoken about, and they'll actually have their feet planted right within the edges of the bank. Those are some of the willows and the sedges that you see. The middle elevation is just crawling up the bank to the top of the bank. Those are the alders, the cottonwoods, the beautiful sycamores that are out there now, some bays, buckeyes. Again, a layered canopy of shorter trees and taller trees. And then we also want to be able to replace the floodplain terrace, the upland areas. And there we will move into live oaks as well as valley oaks, the toyon, the cherries, the vines. And by doing that, you'll create habitat for more bird species as well. Trees will be removed as a part of the restoration project. They will support the creek realignment, the trail construction, and habitat enhancement. Within this phase of the project, approximately 85 trees are slated for removal. About 30 of those are native trees, the rest are non-native trees, and they vary in size from a couple of inches to a couple of some big trees. There are 10 that are considered specimen trees. Some are in declining health, some are in good shape. And in addition to that, we'll also be removing non-native exotic species. When you go out to the park, there are a number of things that grow there now that we've placed in the corridor. The blue flower, that's the vinca, the periwinkle plant, the arundo, the tall weed grasses, the sour grasses, all of those compete and take away from our ability to have a mixed native habitat. So those are some of the things we'll be taking out of the corridor, but we'll be putting a lot back. We're going to be restoring vast areas of this 60-acre portion of the park within this phase. All the picnic areas that are south of the swimming pool, so those areas between the swimming pools and McClellan, are going to be abandoned and turned into restoration areas. That also includes the picnic area that's along the Scenic Circle Drive, will be abandoned and restored as an upper floodplain terrace area. The new creek banks will all have new plantings. The old creek banks will have additional buffer area and more mid-elevation plants added and intermixed with the existing plants. It will also be updating the West Bank picnic area and providing plant buffer pockets between the picnic areas. So you'll have more privacy in the picnic areas by adding some native vegetation in between them. This totals about 3 acres and includes over 5,000 new plants to be added into the corridor. And again, those seeds are actually being collected and stored and will be grown over this winter and next year in anticipation of the project. Finally, the trail. Stevens Creek Trail will eventually run from Stevens Creek Boulevard to McClellan Road. It'll be 8 feet wide. It'll be a multi-use trail. It will be a soft surface, pervious, that allows water percolation. It will allow water access in one area where kids can get in and get their feet wet. They can do environmental ed, as well as you can just cool your toes if you're out at a picnic. You'll also be able to cross the creek on 2 bridges, one near the Stockelmeyer area in a later phase, and the one that will connect the picnic area to the pool area. So you'll have some views into the pools, and someday it would be delightful to be able to stand on that bridge and gaze down at big 30-inch steelhead. I mean, that would really be a success story for us. In addition, because we're going to be introducing more people to the length of the corridor, we're adding another acre of planting to the floodplain terrace, which will provide some additional screening along the trail and habitat and forage area for the animals of the corridor. Ultimately, the city will be changing their whole operation, and you're going to hear a little bit about that tonight. There'll be trail patrols and active monitoring to make sure that the trail integrates efficiently into the corridor and that we can enjoy the resource for what this is, which is a part of the natural California landscape that is disappearing across our state so rapidly. Thank you very much. We do have one video clip that will show you a little bit about the habitat that's out there and the restoration plants that'll be put in the ground.
Native plants provide a great filtering system for water that flows overland into the stream. And basically, these plants kind of slow down the flow of water. And by slowing down the flow, the water has more time to percolate, and there's more time for the plants to use the water. So the water that actually makes it to the creek is cleaner, and it's less turbid or less cloudy. And it turns out that that's real important for the steelhead because they need the visibility in order to feed. So we're real pleased to be able to take part in this.
Okay, thanks. You can clap for our movie star over here. This is Pat Showalter. Thank you, Pat. So Jonna talked a little bit about what we need to do to get this area healthy again, and she touched on some controversial areas, and I want to touch on some of those myself, because there is a lot of concern about the loss of the tall trees. But the environment at the park is currently unhealthy. There's no understory. There's no growth to come up and replace old trees that die. We just had a pine there that reached the end of its life and died, and yet there isn't an understructure for that. But there isn't also provisions for nature, for other native plants. Those have been really replaced by areas that have been stamped down by lots of picnic goers, lots of yahoo.com picnics that we've had there over the years. And so it is important for us to start a healthy, complete environment, which includes smaller trees and other plants. Also, of course, as was mentioned, getting the creek healthy involves moving a lot of it, and that's going to impact some of the trees, and also the putting in the trail will impact some of the trees. But getting the trail into a healthy state is something that we expect will be there forever. And the trees now will have some new trees growing. They've got their nursery project going, and they will be growing now in a healthy corridor. So we think it's a good trade-off. There will be people that will be worried about the loss of some of the tall trees that are there, but ultimately, with some patience, this will be a much healthier environment. So next up to speak with us is Barbara Banfield. Barbara's the city naturalist, and she has her own view, and I'm sure she's excited about having an environmental classroom out there, so she doesn't teach in the rain anymore. But also, I'm sure we'll talk about the opportunities this will bring to educate our residents and especially our kids about nature. So, Barbara, clap.
You know, I'm very excited about the restorations that's going to happen. I've worked for Cupertino for 20 years. I've enjoyed the opportunity to serve the community, working with students, teachers, gardeners, birders, just people out for a walk on the weekend, out to photographers come and use the corridor too. But, you know, the real treat is getting to go to work in McClellan Ranch Park, where you have this incredible, you have the tall sycamores, you have buckeyes that change with every season, and you have that understory that blackberry doesn't have, that layered vegetation that is so important to have structure for the birds and the wildlife that are there. It's always about this time of the year as the growing kind of slows down and a lot of leaves are lost that you start to notice these little tunnels, burrows through the vegetation, these pathways through grass into the bushes that let you know that animals are regularly going in and out there. The ones you don't see when you're there in the day, the raccoons, the possums, maybe even a wood rat. Who knows what we have there? I hope one day I will have confirmation that we have wood rats. It's a desirable species. But all of these little things need that understory. And some of the plants at McClellan are going to help get that understory started down there in blackberry. And if you look on your table, there's a little arrangement, some white berries, some red rose hips. Those, I usually don't use McClellan Ranch Park as my personal flower cutting garden. But for this occasion, the timing was perfect because next week, growers from Watershed Nursery have arranged to come down, and they needed to get seed for some plant, including they were looking for wild rose. I said, I knew they were looking for something for the table tonight, and so what you see on the table the beautiful little arrangement, all those berries or rose hips will get mushed up, soaked in water, the seeds will get separated from the pulp, and they will be grown by very competent growers at Watershed Nursery into plants that will go into the nursery. I think I'm very excited about that. I think there'll be about over 100, I never remember numbers, 116 or something wild roses, 30-some snowberries. This is just, Jonna already told you there'd be 5,000 plants grown in total. But if you look over the other side of the room, there's a vase with some red berries. I don't know if you noticed them. That's toyon. And they too will be propagated. I think over 300 toyons will go in. Very important plant for birds, both for the structure, for hiding in, and for the berries that they eat. It was the first time tonight that I saw some of those computer-generated images of what the creek will look like through blackberry. And I was a little disappointed when I saw some of the pictures because it shows the banks as these flat green panels. It almost looked like panels of green concrete. And I didn't want anyone to get the idea that that's what the creek looks like. Those were just images because a lot of plants will go in there. And, you know, plants that we don't even have or have in very small numbers in McClellan. McClellan was used for agriculture for so many years that we've lost many of the plants that were probably once there. And so we're getting back, I think 800 native grasses will go out there. And we have just a handful in McClellan. I've been working with volunteers and will continue to work with volunteers to get more native plants at McClellan and get it restored. But the one thing I'm so excited about this whole project and the way it's coming together is that right now you have the nature preserve at one end of the corridor, and then you have picnicking or golfing or something at the other end of the corridor. And as this restoration proceeds, I think we will have a seamless nature area. Of course, you know, we're never restoring the golf course to what it used to be, but all along the banks, there's just such an opportunity for nature study now down in Blackberry and all along the creek as you get that missing element, that understory back there, as you kind of have a buffer. Every spring, I walk down there and I'm excited to see wood ducks. They're usually a pair of them are there. Sometimes I see mergansers in the creek too. And I'm always hoping they'll stick around, that they might nest there. They need trees, hollow trees to nest in, and I've talked to some members of Audubon are talking about getting nest box up. But what I think they really might need is that buffer, so when the picnicking starts in earnest, they aren't scared away. And I think that might happen. Thank you.
So I think it's interesting that Barbara touched on a topic that is probably of interest to all of us, so I want to expand a little bit on it, and that's the trade-offs, like keeping the golf course. As we went through this process of gathering everybody's visions, 108, I think, visions, funny, they weren't all the same. There were some differences of opinions, and there were people that wanted gymnasiums out there, and there were people that wanted cricket fields. You probably heard some of these ideas. There were people that wanted an 18-hole golf course, and other people that wanted us to put in a driving range right in the middle. And of course, there are people that want us to take out everything, take out the swimming pools, take out all the buildings in there and the fences, and leave people out. And so we have this big range, and ultimately our city staff, in conjunction with the Parks and Rec Commission and the council, had to make some calls. One of them was to keep the golf course. The golf course was considered important by senior citizens here, by people that are starting to play golf and people that are finishing their golfing careers, because it's that kind of golf course. And it's not just the golf course. There are people that don't have access to swimming pools, and frankly, there are people that felt they never had access to these pools because they were for people outside of Cupertino, but they wanted to keep them. And so these things are trade-offs. We have tried to be faithful to our first goal, which was the restoration and the health of the creek, and I hope you'll pick that theme up. But we didn't think that the residents who did these visioning, the 500 people that participated in that, wanted us to go all the way and remove everything. And so we have tried to get that careful balance between a healthy creek and still listening to our residents about what they wanted to keep there. Next up is our Director of Public Works, who has the job of making this happen, turning this into reality. And it's going to be a bit of an ugly process. You know, there's going to be tractors out there and trees that have to go down and trees that have to go in and bridges that have to go down and bridges that have to go in. And it's scary because that kind of thing seems somewhat incompatible with our corridor. But I think we can trust Ralph to do a great job there. He's going to talk about it. He built this building on time and under budget, and the same thing with the library. And I'm excited about this phase getting started. And so Ralph's going to tell you a little bit about that. This is our Director of Public Works, Ralph Qualls.
There's some video clip you were going to run. You're not going to do that now or not? Okay. Well,
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, item 14 is an event that we have been long awaited to bring to you.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, and I think our TV producer, Rick Kitson, put that clip in there knowing there was an NFL game tonight and I might not show up, so we have that. Let me first talk about schedule, and then I'll talk about the budget for this project, or the cost, actually, of the project. First of all, the completion of the PS&E, which is the plans, specifications, and estimates, is to be completed late 2007. We're not going to do any activity on the project in terms of design until late this spring, May or so. We'll bring the consultant team back in and finish up all that. That means we'll have a package that we can then advertise for contractors. In between that time, though, there's a number of reviews and permits by many of the regulatory agencies and others who have a stake in this project, and those permits have to be secured before we can even turn a shovel of dirt. The advertising for bids, that is, we put it out to the package and have contractors bid on it, and we will receive those bids sometime in late February and hope to be able to receive a good bid, a good price, and take that to the City Council for award of the contract. The construction would then begin sometime after, well, it'll begin right after the award, which will be sometime in April of 2008. And let me point that out again. The construction activity on this project will not proceed until sometime around April of 2008. That's almost 18 months away. So there's been a lot of concern that we're going right out there and start tearing up the creek and doing a lot of stuff. That's simply not going to happen. We need all this time to make all those preparations and preliminary activities. So when construction does begin in April, it'll take about a year to complete it. In April of 2009, the work should be done, and we'll be able to reopen the park and the trail with the new facilities and the new restoration of this entire area. The cost estimate for the project, we've already completed the master plan that many of you participated in and the environmental work. That was $583,000. The design and construction services, those are our architects and many of whom you've heard from tonight, our consultants who will put this package together over the course of this entire project, this next 2 years, is a little over, it's almost $1.6 million. Construction management during construction, which will begin again in April of 2008 to assist us in managing the project and scheduling and paying and so on, $200,000. And there are utility fees and a number of administrative requirements, including the permits that need to be done in the amount of $479,000. The construction itself is a little over $8 million. That's the entire construction package, or everything that you heard everyone here talk before me talk about tonight. In addition, we've added a small contingency for, this is what we call the WWF fund. It's what we forgot. So this is stuff that goes in, it comes up, it's an uncertainty, and we learn about it as we complete the design. The final total of this project, as Teresa told you earlier, is almost $11.2 million. And as Mayor Lowenthal said, construction is not a pretty thing, especially when you're working in a very sensitive environmental area. But I can assure you we're going to do our best to protect everything that's there that will stay and to restore to a much greater level of satisfaction the facilities that are there. The only activity that you'll see now between now and April of 2008 will be some minor maintenance activity. The park is closed and will stay closed until April of 2009. So with your support and your help and your interest, I'm certain this will be a very successful and exciting construction contract. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Very good. Okay. The other aspect of this project is the ultimate operation that we're going to have there. That is what you're going to be able to do there. And Julia will be talking about that. She is currently running it, but it's pretty easy because it's closed. So she's doing a great job. But she will be talking a little bit about the plans coming up. I wanted to, we'll talk in a minute, but I wanted to assure people that as this construction goes on, we know that you'll be concerned about things. There's a lot of love for this area, and people have already expressed some emotion about their feelings for what's going on there, and some fear of change and all of that. So before we get done tonight, we'll talk a little bit about how you can contact us, when you have any concerns about it, when you want somebody to come out, because we think that's an important aspect of this. We know there's passion for the Stevens Creek corridor. We know you care, and we do too. So we will want to hear from you when you have concerns. The primary person for the operation is Julia Lamy. She's been working for the city for a long time. If you hang around the senior center, you've seen her there. Now she's taken on the additional duties of running the operation in the corridor. So without further ado, Julia Lamy.
When Blackberry Farm reopens in spring 2009, it will be a restored community park that is an environmentally friendly park. We are committed to improve the business practices around the use of renewable resources as well as protecting the environment. This will be achieved by applying the following 7 best environmental practices. Number 1, use of biodegradable paper products and tableware. Biodegradable, compostable tableware is made from 100% sugarcane fiber. Sugarcane is not only a renewable resource, but the sugarcane can be turned into products normally made from plastic or paper. Bioplastics used to create drink cups, cutlery, drinking straws, and takeout containers are 100% biodegradable and compostable. Bioplastics are made from sugarcane fiber, corn, and potato starch. Number 2, the new snack bar menu featuring natural and organic food and beverages. Using natural and organic foods engages in the practice that protects the environment while providing high-quality, fresh food to park visitors. Number 3, use of less toxic pest management techniques. By using less toxic pest management concepts, we can prevent pesticides and chemicals from showing up in our local waterways and preventing water pollution. Number 4, provide charcoal chimney starters for required use on all charcoal barbecues. Lighter fluid literally goes up in smoke, causing half a ton of smog each day in the Bay Area. We will provide charcoal chimney starters to all picnic group people who come out to start barbecues at Blackberry Farm. Number 5, provide recycling and compost containers throughout the park. A simple and convenient collection system for recycling and composting will result in greater public participation. Well-marked recycling containers placed in common areas will enable us to collect the greatest volume of recyclables. Number 6, use of energy-efficient, low-emission vehicles in the park. By using the EPA's Green Vehicle Guide, we will be able to choose the cleanest, most fuel-efficient vehicles that meets the park's needs. Low emissions, good fuel economy are both important for the environment. Number 7, use of Energy Star products for superior energy-efficient equipment. A cornerstone of the Energy Star program is identifying efficient products that are reliably deliver energy savings and environmental benefits. By installing these business practices for resource conservation and pollution prevention, Blackberry Farm will be an environmentally friendly park for all Cupertino residents to enjoy. I would like to invite Mayor Lowenthal back to the podium.
Thanks very much, Julia. Let's see if I can operate this computer. Oh, there we go. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to mention especially Therese Smith here, who runs the Parks and Rec department, put this together, has really ran the visioning process, which was new for Cupertino and frankly was an award-winning process, and has taken the lead in collecting your thoughts and turning them into action. It's a tough job because there are compromises and balance we have to do every day, and it's tough. And I want to thank Therese for all your hard work. She's there in the back. Round of applause. And she won't forgive me if I don't thank her staff. She's got Mike there, Christine's here, Julia's here. We have Terry Green, a lot of the staff members. They've been great in putting this together, very patient with us as the council pulls them in all kinds of directions. And I want to thank you all for being here today. It's been very helpful. I want to acknowledge Council Member Orrin Mahoney back here quietly in the back. Orrin. But mostly this is about you, and this is a bit of an experiment to us where the council takes a low-key role. We provided really one or two areas of direction, and we've tried to stay out of this a bit. I think we get a better result. I hate to say it, but I think we get a better result when we take a back seat and let the people make the decisions, and that's the process we've tried here. And I hope you are happy with the result. I hope you enjoy watching it happen. I want to make one comment. The IT staff and the video staff that's here is just fabulous. I don't know if you've watched any of this on TV, but you can watch the reruns. They're absolutely great. Rick Kitson and his staff are just fabulous. they're going to be a little bit unhappy with me because I'm running over, but that's okay. They'll bear with it. I need to mention something about revenue here, because people are worried about whether we make money or whether we don't make money in this corridor. And what does it mean that we don't have the big picnics there, the 4,500 people there anymore? The city isn't about revenue. We're not a business. We're not trying to raise the value of our stockholders. We're not trying to pay a dividend. We're trying to provide services. That's our job. And when we do charge for a fee, all we do is plow that money back in so we can provide more services. In this case, we think the trade-off is to open up this area to you year-round in a protected environment that's healthy, so that you can all share in it and you can all live in it, and your kids can get an appreciation for nature, and they can participate with nature out there, and it's nature that's healthy. And so we're not here about making money. We're about providing new services to you and new availability to this resource that, frankly, you paid for out of your taxes and you continue to pay for out of your utility tax that we put together for buying this park. We owe it to you. So it isn't about making money. It's about bringing something new to you, and that's what we're endeavoring to do. And I hope when all is said and done, you think we did a good job of that. So I mentioned this. If you have concerns as you see a tree come down or a tractor go in or whatever, call this number. This is a hotline. This number is exclusively for this project. So if any time you have a question about how is this going, when's something going to happen, when's something going to stop happening, what's all that noise, are they going to work at 7 in the morning, whatever your concerns are, where's the money coming from, call this number. This is our hotline for people with concerns about how this is going. And so we encourage you to stay in communication with us. We think that you'll feel the best about it if you know what's happening. So please feel free to call. Your council members are also always available if you want to reach us. We're all first initial, last name at Cupertino.org, like R. Lowenthal at Cupertino.org. So we're available to you as well. So thank you very much for coming tonight and participating. We appreciate you being here. We're done.